I know, I look familiar. That's because I am recording 2 videos back to back, so it's a bit cheap, you know? Doesn't feel as authentic, you know? You're supposed to see me weekly, not daily and then split up. I don't really know what the fuck I'm talking about. I was just trying to come up with an intro for the video. I like that intro a lot more. I don't want to do an intro related to Spider-Man. This feels original. This is content. Remember, if it's original, that means it's good. Welcome back, everybody. I am Carter Sandvin, and this is the channel for Sandbox Illustration. Today, we are doing a video that I am so incredibly excited for because it is opening an entire new category of videos, and honestly genre of videos, into my channel. One that I didn't think I'd be able to put into the channel before, but I think I found a way around it. Before we get into the specifics of that, which you guys already know what it is because it's a title most likely, I bet you're wondering what this cryptic white binder is. If we open this up, we can see that we have a bunch of Copic sketches. Oh god damn, why did I give myself such a big ass forehead? This right here is my Spider Sona. I never showed this on YouTube back when I was running the Zeke channel, but I did the Spider Sona challenge, and I did it right around the time that I got Copic markers for the first time. And I wanted to do the Spider Sona trend. It had been a while. It was already 2019, so the movie had been out for a year. But I was thinking, you know what? My art is advancing. Everything about my style is advancing. Why not hop on a super fun-looking trend? So I did, and I made Recluse. I tried to combine my love for the wilderness and outdoors with my artistic side. So I did that with Recluse. So like instead of webs, he has rope actually, like a big thing of rope that shoots out into this canister kind of. But looking at it, it's definitely one of my better Copic pieces for the time. My skill had obviously improved going forward in the later years, but for first starting out with Copics, this piece is actually pretty damn good. But then Spider-Man No Way Home came out, and I was like, yo, what? Fantastic movie. I have to discuss it on my channel somehow, but I don't know how. And then I remembered that I have a lineup of videos that are going to be coming out at some point of me reviewing certain movies or stories or video games, etc., while doing a Let's Draw of them during the review. And I was like, I could do that with Spider-Man. And I was like, oh, but what would I draw? Like, do I just draw the 3 Spider-Men? That'd be a cool drawing, but nothing original. You know, I wanted it to be something with my own touch just a little bit in there. You know, because everybody's seen a bunch of drawings of the 3 Spider-Men lately. But then I thought about it and I was like, hey, I made my Spider Sona a while back, and looking at this drawing, I actually do want to update the drawing. Like I said, this drawing is not bad. It's not even so much that I think it needs improvement. I just want to revamp it, you know? I want to put it in with my current skill set, my current style, current utilities available to me. I want to redo this, and honestly, I want to do a redesign of it because I had a period there where I wore this orange vest, and I don't know why. Looking at this drawing, the whole focus is that, like, he takes place mostly in nature, you know? He uses his rope, and it wraps around trees, and he swings from that. But that and the headpieces, I'd say, are really the only parts that scream outdoors to me. Everything else is very much just kind of like a standard Spider-Man suit. So I was thinking that I would redo it today with my current look, again, current art capabilities, and try to implement more of a nature feel within the piece rather than just purely artistic, because, I mean, the boots, those are like clean, sleek, colorful boots, along with the shirt. I do like the shirt idea in the concept that I drew the logo myself, which again, I know that Spider-Man's always done that, but I tried to make it where I put my own artistic twist on it. So, you know, it's got bright, vibrant colors, and you can almost get some expression out of the spider on it. I do want to redo that, but other than that, I want to try and make it more nature-oriented and a bit more rustic feeling, to be honest. You know, this is a bit too clean and modern, and that's just not really an aesthetic that fits me that well. So I thought it would be super fun to redo this piece while giving a voiceover of my review of Spider-Man No Way Home. I just watched Spider-Man No Way Home a couple days ago for the second time, actually. I went once with my girlfriend, the next time with my best friend, and both times I had nothing but a blast, and I would love to talk about that movie with you guys today. One of the big reasons why I'm excited to do this segment is I love doing movie reviews and just general story reviews. Not even so much movies in particular, but just general storycraft. If you guys don't know, on my previous channel, Zeke, I had a series called Sour Cinema where I reviewed movies, and I would love to try and bring as much diverse content to this channel as possible instead of just having the same things over and over again. So I thought it would be really fun to implement movie reviews and story reviews into the channel in that way by voicing them over a Let's Draw. So today we are going to be recreating Recluse, my Spider-Sona, while I give a review of Spider-Man No Way Home. Let's get to drawing. First of all, I'm just gonna have to apologize if you guys can hear any background noise. I've got neighbors outside trying to clean some stuff, people in my house. Bottom line, let's just get right into this. Just for clarification's sake, just on some context of the piece before we actually get into the review itself, I wanted to recreate Recluse so that he had much more of a nature feeling to him instead of the modern stylized look that Spider-Man typically has, because I really wanted to break the mold with this one and make him feel like he's truly his own character. So I went with some tactical equipment like the mask itself, and then he's got a lot of like classic leather drawn onto his belt and his extra pieces and all that, and I wanted to give him kind of the same style of my signature jacket. And then instead of webs, I'm gonna have him actually shooting a rope that has a grappling hook on the end, and then he just swings on it, kind of like Nathan Drake. If you guys can't tell already, I fucking love Nathan Drake. I absolutely loved this movie. This is easily my favorite MCU movie, if not one of my favorite movies. Now, sure, fine, I understand. I don't have a giant roster of movies in my mind, so I don't have a lot to work with. So I know that one of my favorites is Spider-Man, but still, this was a beautiful movie. Let's just get right into why. First, I need to establish there are definitely going to be spoilers in this video. There is so much of this movie that some audiences may not know about, so I'm just putting up the warning right here, spoilers ahead. To be completely honest, I was a little bit skeptical going into this movie originally because I knew how much was rumored to be in it, and I was a little afraid that it was going to be another Avengers Endgame where there is so much to the point where it's fun, but can end up being a bit of a headache at the end of the day. But rest assured, they put everything in this movie that everybody wanted, and they pulled it off beautifully. The pacing was perfect. Almost all of the characters were perfect. I say almost, we will be getting into that near the end. But everything in this story was such a clean flow of events from one to the other that they did this beautifully. I cannot give them more credit for the way that they crafted this story. It was pulled off damn near perfectly. Another thing that I was a bit nervous about was one thing that I've always had an issue with when it came to the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, or the Homecoming movies, is it always kind of felt like Disney and Sony were almost at like a tug of war, you know? Because everybody knows the big conflict that's been going on with having Spider-Man in MCU movies and then Sony trying to keep his property. And it always felt like with all of his movies, there was a huge tug of war going back and forth between Disney trying to put in their characters and Sony trying to put in Spider-Man. So a lot of times whenever you got the Disney movies with Spider-Man, it felt like they really just like shoved in MCU characters just to kind of be there, you know? Like, let's face it, one of the biggest highlights of Spider-Man Homecoming was Iron Man, and one of the biggest highlights of Far From Home was Nick Fury, and they still talked about Iron Man in that one, and it really never felt like they had Spider-Man just truly have his own movie. It really just felt like an MCU movie starring Spider-Man, if you get what I'm saying. But I can confidently say that they did not do that whatsoever in this movie. Even with Doctor Strange being a main character, and them even having a cameo of Daredevil at one point, this is the first ever Tom Holland movie that truly felt like a Spider-Man movie. Obviously that might be because there were 3 Spider-Men in it, but rest assured, I never felt like Doctor Strange or any of the other characters stole the spotlight from Spider-Man. Spider-Man was always the main character in this. And by the way, what they did with Strange in the movie was pretty perfect, you know? They wrote in a really good reason for him to not, I don't know, be an authority figure over Peter throughout the entire movie. Speaking of that, I want to talk about Peter's arc here. Peter had a beautiful arc throughout the entire thing. Went from feeling totally helpless and trying to get everything he wanted, even though he knew he probably couldn't, and not really willing to let things go. And then at the end, you see him just fully accept his fate and just say, I'm gonna do something here that is going to be horrible for me, but amazing for everybody else. And I'm willing to accept that fate. So please do this for me. And that was damn near beautiful. And also, he continued that whole mantra when it came to the scene with MJ and Ned at the very end. He understood, it's like, things are gonna suck for me, but it's okay, because everything is gonna be good for everybody else. And I'm okay with that. Moving on, talking about the plot, one thing that I really want to give credit to is that nothing in this movie felt like a plot contrivance. Nothing felt like it was breaking character or interrupting the pacing, just to put in an important plot point, if you get what I mean. So, like for instance, getting Strange out of the picture so that Peter's the only one there, that made total sense. They disagreed on how to handle the situation, and they fought, and Peter won. So that got Doctor Strange out of the picture. And deciding to help the villains and keep them in his universe, that really did feel like a character moment rather than a plot moment. And that is exactly how this movie went. It never felt like plot points were forced or characters did things that they weren't supposed to. It went off beautifully. Every single moment that happened, it felt like it needed to happen. And I really give kudos to that. Another moment that wasn't forced was Aunt May's death, you know? Everything that led up to that happening made total sense, you know? The goblin actually being there was because Peter and May had this motivation to help these people, and the fight actually made sense because Goblin is fucking powerful and he's actually a threat, and everything that the Goblin did is just what the Goblin does, you know? And also, her death really did have an impact. It didn't just happen and then leave it from there. It affected the rest of the plot, especially towards the end when Peter's fighting Goblin and he tries to kill him. The way that Tobey Maguire Peter put it in this, we'll call him Peter 2, the way that Peter 2 put it was like, maybe her death didn't have any meaning because of the with great power comes great responsibility thing. That, very beautiful. I bawled my eyes out when I saw that scene, by the way. It was a beautiful scene. Now we're going to be getting into the big part, talking about the Spider-Men and the other villains and even Daredevil. All of the nostalgia boosts, I'll call them, in this movie, none of them were just shoved in. You know, they actually work with the movie. They make sense. And by the way, a good note to put on this, a good example to show, is when I noticed that J. Jonah Jameson in the trench coat and fedora was actually the original J. Jonah Jameson, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. But then it dawned on me, and I was like, oh, everybody that was brought to this universe was looking for Spider-Man. And he wanted to get the story on Spider-Man, so of course he's here. And also the other Peters, they didn't just show up, you know? Again, they had the same thing. They were looking for Peter. They were trying to help him, which is a great example to just show the kind of person that Peter Parker is. I really love how they pulled that off. But none of the characters coming in felt just like fan service, you know? All of them had a place, and they would even throw in the nice little nods to previous movies, you know, the I'm something of a scientist myself. They had that in there. And the other Peters were calling back to other movies. But they didn't just come in to do that. They were actually part of the story, and you don't see that a lot. Chris Stuckman made an awesome point, which I loved. He was saying that he was terrified that when Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man was going to come in, that he was just going to swing in, say, pizza time, and then leave. But he didn't do that, Every character that came in that was a bit of fan service actually had a place, They didn't just bring them in to bring them in. Although, some of them they might have. But again, we'll talk about that towards the end. Speaking of Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, and Tom Holland Spider-Man, the trio was absolutely amazing in this movie. They all felt like their own characters, even though they were all the same person technically. And I love too, which I found out through later information and like interviews and stuff with the characters, that they played with the idea of almost having them be like siblings. So then Andrew Garfield is like the awkward middle child that's trying to get some of the spotlight. So then, the scene where he said like, you ain't the shit no more, and he just drops his head in shame. And I was like, oh no, it's perfect. I hate that it's perfect. Now looking at the end of the movie. Okay, so the way that it went was all of the characters just forget about Peter. Because they saved all of the villains, but then they put in the thing where it was like, but he can't actually seal the break in the space-time continuum. What do we do? And Peter had his beautiful moment of just saying, have everyone forget who I am. Everybody. Because they're all trying to come after me, right? So just have them all forget me. And it happens. And so when it gets to the scene where Peter is going to Ned and MJ and he's going to explain what happens, and he decides not to do it, and he just puts the note away. First off, can I just say, this is totally on me. I'm not blaming the movie for this. It was a dumb move on my part. I didn't know that he was just deciding to not do it at all. When he just put the note away and said, no thank you, have a good day. I legitimately thought in my head, I was like, oh, okay, he's just going to come back and do it later. I didn't think that he was just completely abandoning them. I thought that he was going to come back later and have it just a bit more put together. But honestly, that's a beautiful thing to do for him. Recognizing that MJ was hurt, and so he was like, the best thing for you would be to stay away from me. So I'm just not going to do this. Absolutely beautiful moment in the movie. Now, there were some issues with the movie that I do have to discuss. One, some of the villains didn't really feel like they needed to be there. Back where I was saying that like almost every character had their place. The Lizard and Electro. Although Sandman kind of did too. It really just kind of felt like those villains were just there, The Goblin and Otto were really the only ones that like truly had character in this movie. The other ones, they had characters, like they had the writing, but they didn't have much of a place. Lizard was the worst by far. Not terrible, which by the way, I fucking loved his CGI in this movie. I way like his newer look that like it's got more visceral scales growing on him, The first one, he just kind of looked like a booger. But I thought he looked way better in this one. But he didn't really do much in this movie, It didn't feel like he needed to be there. Back where I was saying characters push the plot, not the plot pushing the characters, it felt like the plot couldn't have gone on without Otto or without the Goblin. But Sandman and Electro and the Lizard, it felt like they could have not been there and the movie still could have happened. I still really enjoyed seeing them, They definitely weren't a negative overall on the movie. They weren't really there in terms of the writing, but they were still a lot of fun to watch, so I'm not going to complain too much. Another thing that I want to note too is that the beginning of the movie is all about Peter trying to deal with like the legal troubles of what happened with Mysterio. But then once it got to the point where they went and stayed at Happy's apartment, they just kind of stopped that. And honestly, I felt like the beginning part was almost just like its own movie, Like when you watch the entire movie, you don't even think about the fact that they were dealing with FBI and SWAT teams and lawyers and Daredevil and whatnot. It felt like its own little thing, not really a flowing part of the entire movie. And also, they didn't really resolve it, you know? Like, they didn't show a part where they were like, oh, finally, the feds are taken care of, court's done. You know, like, they could have had just one, like, 2-minute part where they walk in and they're both wearing, where Aunt May and Peter are wearing, like, nice outfits, nice suits, and they're like, finally, this is done with. Now, let's get on to college. And then that's where it flows into, like, the MIT stuff. Yeah, it just kind of felt like they stopped it. It did feel like a bit of a bog on the pacing, the very beginning part. But other than that, those are really my only critiques of the movie. And even then, with those critiques being there, this is by far one of my favorite movies of all time. It is definitely up there, at least in my top 5. I adore this movie with all of my heart. It was so heartwarming to watch. It was so gut-wrenching. It was so real. It truly felt like it had weight to it rather than just being a fan service movie. I absolutely would recommend this movie to everybody that I know, and for that and all the other reasons I've listed, I'm going to give this movie a 9.5 out of 10. Everybody, that was Recluse and my review of Spider-Man No Way Home. I think for now I'm just going to discuss the piece just a little bit. I am extremely happy with how this turned out. I love the detail, by the way, of him having his spider logo on the grappling hook, like on the end of it. And like I said at the beginning, I wanted to give him much more of a nature feel, you know? I wanted to go with more earth tones and greens and stuff. I wanted him to stand out from other Spider-Man iterations. And also, I sort of took it back to the original one where I play on the artistic side of myself a little bit, and I put in a custom spider design on his jacket, which I love. Granted, some stuff in this piece is not the best, you know, the background could use some work. The mountain piece, I think, looks very good, especially with the sun highlights. The trees in the background don't look the greatest, they do look a bit amateurish. It's something that I'm still trying to work on, you know. Granted, I didn't put a huge amount of effort into it, but it is still something that could use some work. And the trees as well. I hate drawing pine needles. If I could ever avoid drawing a pine needle again, or pine trees, I'm going to do it, because pine needles are the worst. I hate them so much. But that is the piece for you, and that is also my review for you. This is a series that I am very much looking forward to. I'm gonna have a lot of fun doing this. I don't even think I would consider this a Let's Draw. I think that this would be its own section of video, which is very cool. And you know what? I'm gonna do the YouTube-y thing here, and I want you guys to tell me down below your thoughts on the movie, critiques, highlights that you liked. Just tell me what you thought about the movie. I know I'm kind of selling out right here for some comments, but hey, it's gonna be fun. But that is all that I have to say. This was Carter Sandvin with Sandbox Illustration. Make sure to check down in the description for links to more of my content. Like the video, comment on it, and subscribe for weekly art-related videos. Anyways, have fun, dudes.